Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining this open house for the 7th Avenue Greenway for the City of Mission. We're very excited to have you join us tonight and learn a little bit more about the 7th Avenue Greenway and the process we have gone through to date, as well as to learn about the findings of our first phase of public engagement and some of the options we're presenting as part of this phase of public engagement. So thank you, everyone, for taking the time to join us here tonight. The agenda for the open house tonight, we'll start off with some introductions. We'll do a project overview, summarize what we heard through the phases of engagement to date. We'll present our proposed options that we're taking to the public for this round of engagement for the 7th Avenue Greenway. And then we will summarize the current public engagement opportunities. At the end of the presentation, there will be an opportunity for questions and answers and discussion about the materials that are presented tonight. So in terms of introductions, my name is Brian Patterson. I'm a transportation planner with Urban Systems, and I am joined tonight by Brent McMurtry, transportation engineer with Urban Systems, and Abby Jane McGrath, an engagement and communication specialist with Urban Systems, as well as Paul Butterfield from the City of Mission. So welcome to everybody on the call tonight. The purpose of this open house, this virtual open house, is to provide information about the 7th Avenue Greenway project, to provide an overview of where we are in the design process, to summarize what we've done so far in terms of engagement and technical work for the project, and to present some draft concept designs that we have developed based on input from the first round of engagement. And we'll be presenting 3 concept designs tonight, looking at 3 different options for cycling facilities, as well as a number of improvements for other road users, looking at pedestrian improvements, roadway network improvements, improvements to transit, and considerations for parking and loading and emergency access. And again, at the end of the meeting, we'll have an opportunity to provide answers to any of your questions about the project or designs and share information on upcoming ways to engage and provide your feedback on the project and the design. So the study area for this project, we're looking at a corridor that extends from Wren Street in the west all the way to Dewey Trunk Road in the east. And there are 3 project segments that we're looking at as part of this project. In the light blue, the west segment, this is the primary focus for our discussion tonight, extending from Wren Street to Fraser River Heritage Park. In the middle, we have the East Mission Heritage Greenway through Fraser River Heritage Park and tying into that existing trail and pathway network. And no changes are proposed in that existing segment in the central area. And then the eastern segment between Fraser River Heritage Park and Dewey Trunk Road, we would be looking at some signage and pavement markings to have a shared cycling route on low volume residential streets through that area. So although this overall project extends for about 6.5 kilometers from Wren Street to Dewey Trunk Road, our main focus tonight again will be on this western segment from Wren Street to Fraser River Heritage Park. So there's a number of options that we'll be looking at tonight to reimagine what the possibilities could be along 7th Avenue to make it more attractive, safe, convenient, and comfortable for walking, wheeling, and cycling using active forms of transportation. And these images will show some of the options that we'll be talking about a little bit later in the presentation, but we'll give you a sense of some of the considerations. The top image shows the existing conditions looking eastbound in front of École Mission Secondary School. And you can see some of the possibilities that we'll explore later on in the session to include a one-way protected bike lane on each side of the street with a separated sidewalk, to have a two-way protected bike lane on the north side of the street, again with a separated sidewalk, or to have a bit of a hybrid option at the bottom where we would have a combined multi-use pathway in this segment of the corridor. Where pedestrians and cyclists and other forms of active transportation would share one facility. And then in the other portions of the corridor to the east and the west, we'd be looking at either one of the first 2 options, the one-way or the two-way protected bicycle lane. So some of the reasons why this is an important project, this Greenway can actually help the city to meet a number of important focus areas that are identified in the city's strategic plan. Things like enabling a safe community. The Greenway will provide a safe place outside of the vehicle travel lanes for people of all ages and abilities to walk or roll across really almost the entire length of Mission going east to west. It really connects the entire community. In terms of securing finance, assets, and infrastructure, the design of the Greenway represents an opportunity to access future financing for active transportation grants, both federally and provincially, to kind of maximize the effectiveness of taxpayer funds. This can help support economic development goals through diversity of land uses and travel choices that enhance property values in the vicinity. This can help contribute to livable, complete community, and it can also contribute to an engaged community through the engagement process that we're going through. Whoops. So the project context and history, and Paul spoke a little bit about this in the introductions. 7th Avenue has been identified as a high priority cycling corridor in a range of plans and policies spanning back almost 20 years, originally back in the 2003 Bicycle Master Plan, 2009 Parks, Trails and Bicycle Master Plan, and the 2016 Transportation Master Plan. And further to each of those plans, in 2018, Council passed a resolution essentially to complete this study, to complete a bike route along 7th Avenue to connect the Hatzick area in the east to Wren Street in the west. And so going through this design study, building on that council resolution. So the timeframe that we're going through, we had an initial round of community engagement earlier in the year, back in the fall, February and March, where we had an online survey. We'll speak to that in a few slides. And we're in the second phase here, where we have some design options that we prepared based on what we heard from the community, and really conducting this community engagement to identify community's preferences on a number of the options that we have in front of you. Based on what we hear, we'll be working to then refine and confirm a preferred design, and then take that to detailed design and eventually to construction. As Paul mentioned, this is currently a design study, so we don't have a timeline for construction or committed capital funding at this point. That would be kind of an outcome of this study once we have a preferred design to work through those details in terms of construction, timing, and funding. So why 7th Avenue? Again, some of this was mentioned a little bit earlier. It provides a direct and continuous and relatively flat east-west connection, and really that connects the entire width of the city of Mission, and connects a number of important destinations, many parks, schools, and community facilities. And it's envisioned as an east-west spine in the city's active transportation network. And we're calling it a greenway. And so this is much more than just a bicycle facility. We're looking at how we can improve travel options for all forms of active transportation, whether people are choosing to walk, ride, or roll. So that can include cyclists, but also pedestrians, skateboarders, rollerbladers, parents or others using strollers, and people with mobility aids. And we're also really focusing on how people can travel not only for transportation or commuting purposes, but really looking at the recreational options as well, given that all the connections along the corridor to the recreational destinations like Mission Secondary School, the Mission Leisure Center, the Mission Skate Park, and Fraser River Heritage Park. So really, we see this corridor as essentially a connection to a lot of these other recreational destinations that hopefully will encourage people to choose active transportation to get to some of those recreational destinations. So looking at what some other communities are doing, investing in kind of greenways or all ages and abilities active transportation facilities is something that communities across BC and North America are doing, including many communities surrounding Mission in the Fraser Valley. And just some examples here of some kind of similar greenways in Abbotsford and Maple Ridge, and some other bicycle facilities in Chilliwack and Harrison Hot Springs, just to give some context about kind of how other communities are prioritizing and focusing on active transportation. So one thing we're really focusing on, building on some of those previous slides, is mobility for people of all ages and abilities. So we're really looking at providing a facility that can be comfortable for anybody from 8 years old to 80 years old and beyond. So that includes children and families and seniors, and providing a safe and comfortable mobility choice. That's really looking at providing equitable transportation options, providing inclusive options, age-friendly options, and designing a corridor that's accessible and safe for everyone. And what we're really hoping to attract through this project is what we call the interested but concerned segment of the population, which often makes up anywhere from 37 to 60% of the population. And so these are people who maybe aren't cycling currently or don't feel comfortable riding on busy roads. These are people who might ride recreationally or have a bicycle, but just don't feel safe riding next to vehicle traffic. So we're really trying to provide a facility that could be safe and comfortable and attractive to those types of users. So there's a number of issues that we're looking to address through this study. And again, looking at improving the street, not only for cyclists, but for all road users. And there's lots of things we need to consider and balance through this process. First and foremost, looking at the needs of mobility along the corridor. So traffic operations and goods movement are really important things to think about. On-street parking, given that it's largely a residential corridor with a lot of other destinations that have parking needs. We're looking at safety issues, whether it's cyclists or pedestrians or others, making sure we're considering transit access, accessibility, and emergency services, given the fire hall located along 7th Avenue. So as I mentioned, we conducted an initial round of engagement earlier in the year, back between March 9th and April 2nd. We had an online survey with just over 360 participants. And I'll share a few slides of some key highlights of what we heard through this first round of engagement, and which helped to set the stage and kind of inform the designs that you'll see tonight. So we asked, firstly, what are some of your priorities when creating a design for the 7th Avenue Greenway? And we heard the top 3 priorities were parking and loading along the street, vehicle traffic flow, and safety. We also asked what are the top transportation issues and concerns along 7th Avenue, and some pretty similar findings. We heard that safety was the #1 issue and concern, followed by parking availability and high traffic speeds and volume. So some pretty consistent themes there from those 2 questions. We asked some questions about what are some key challenges that people experience when they're either walking or cycling along the corridor. And so on the left, you see a graph that shows the top issues when people are walking or wheeling. And we heard things like intersection safety, lack of lighting, and speed and noise of motor vehicle traffic. And when people are cycling, we did hear that a number of survey respondents don't currently cycle along 7th Avenue, but those that do identified intersection safety, vehicle traffic, and personal safety as some of their key challenges when cycling. We asked how people currently use 7th Avenue. The majority travel by car, about 2/3. But we also had about 10% of people who walk along the corridor, 4% who bike, and 1% who take transit, and a further 16% who kind of use a range of modes. And we asked how often people travel along the corridor, and most people who filled out the survey travel the corridor quite frequently. And we also asked, how likely would you be to use the corridor by walking or cycling once the corridor is built? And we heard that 40% of respondents were very likely to use it, and 12% of respondents were likely to use it. So when you combine those two, about 52% would be likely or very likely, over half of respondents, to use the corridor when it's built. And we asked about some of the key destinations that were important, and probably not a surprise here, really looking at some of these recreational destinations like Fraser River Heritage Park and the Mission Leisure Center as kind of the top two destinations. So with that, I'll pass it over to Brent, and we'll get into some of the design features that are incorporated in the design.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Yeah, so kind of as Brian mentioned, and building off the public engagement results that we saw during the first round of engagement, we created as a project team 6 key design themes that we worked to integrate into our concepts as we're developing them to bring to you tonight. So those 6 themes are pedestrian safety, accessibility and comfort, traffic operations, cycling comfort, on-street parking and driveways, transit, and landscaping in public realm. And so we kind of looked at design opportunities for each of these 6 themes, and we'll highlight some of the opportunities that we included in our designs in the next few slides. So starting first with really kind of that same vision, as this is a greenway that's a street for everyone. It's looking to be inclusive and create opportunities for a safe, comfortable street for all. The first theme of pedestrian safety, accessibility, and comfort focuses on how we can make it better for pedestrians, essentially, with new crosswalks, new curb extensions. There's a new crosswalk with a pedestrian refuge island at Horn Street, so providing protection partway across the crosswalk. The bicycle lane is raised to sidewalk level at crosswalks to improve accessibility and ensure safe connections across the road, and then improved pedestrian experience and connections to Fraser River Heritage Park and the East Mission Heritage Greenway. Second theme of traffic operations, so recognizing that we want to ensure traffic operations and traffic flow is maintained. We are maintaining two-way traffic. All existing left turn lanes are maintained, and the opportunity for a future north-south left turn lane at Cedar Street has also been identified. We're adding a new traffic signal at Murray Street, which has been identified previously and would be a great opportunity to implement through this project. And then we've added new left turn lanes to improve traffic flow at both Horn Street and Dunsmuir Street. Then the final piece is an intersection realignment at Mary Street on the east end of the corridor where there's a skewed intersection currently. Next themes, the next theme of cycling comfort. We've developed physically separated bicycle lanes. These are lanes that would be comfortable for people of all ages and abilities, and all of the options have that feature as a main point. Green pavement markings through intersections. So one of the design elements or places where the greatest conflict may occur is at intersections, and green conflict paint is kind of universally used to identify locations where drivers and people biking need to be have extra sort of awareness that there may be a conflict. And then similar to the pedestrian comfort piece, improve cycling experience and connections to Fraser River East, Fraser River Heritage Park and East Mission Heritage Greenway. So hearing that those key recreational destinations are really important to people from the survey, we've shown a project or created concepts that will connect to those. And then for the fourth theme, on-street parking and driveways, recognizing the residential nature of the corridor or much of the corridor, we have maintained on-street parking on both sides of the street between Juniper Street and Talbot Street. So this isn't the entire corridor, but sort of a section of the corridor where we heard from stakeholders that there's higher needs. So with the school and the leisure center, this is an area where we look to prioritize parking. For the rest of the corridor, on-street parking is retained on the south side of the street with reallocating the space currently used for on-street parking for these cycling facilities. All three options retain at least 60% of the on-street parking along the corridor, and that aligns quite closely with the parking utilization that we've seen through some parking utilization surveys. And then all existing driveway access is maintained along the corridor for all options. On option or theme 5 is transit. All bus stops are maintained, and the accessibility and access is improved at each of these bus stops by bringing the bike lane up to sidewalk level to create a level access point for people getting on and off the bus. Then the sixth, the final theme is landscaping in public realm. And through this design process, we've identified opportunities for landscaping and street trees, opportunities for more benches, garbage cans, and other amenities, opportunities for improved lighting, and there's an opportunity identified for a reduced channelized right turn or getting rid of a channelized right turn at Hurd Street to create an additional public space in a connection to the Kinsman West Park. Something that's been identified and may be implemented at some point. So moving forward, so similar to one of the early slides that Brian showed, we developed renderings, three-dimensional renderings of our three design options here in front of Mission Secondary School. So what we're looking at first is a vision of what the road looks like today, where we're looking east down the corridor with the school on your left and the homes on the right-hand side there. And then we have a rendering of each of the three options through this section. Let's go to the first option here. So our option 1 is one-way protected bike lanes. And so this greenway option has separated bike lanes, so on both sides of the street. And these bike lanes are traveling in the same direction as motor vehicle travel lanes. With this option in front of the school, on-street parking is retained on both sides of the street. So this maximizes the parking that will be available for students and staff of the school, as well as community members when they're maybe accessing the leisure center. And this option also provides a tactile warning sort of separation. So people who are walking on the sidewalk have their own space on the north side and south side. Option two is a two-way protected bike lane only on the north side of the street. So the improvements on the south side of the street are limited to some crossing improvements. So you can see in this option, as well as the previous option, there's a curb extension at the intersection in front of the school, and that to shorten pedestrian crossing distances. And then this option has two-way travel, so both eastbound and westbound cyclists are sharing the same the same lane on the north side of the street, separated from on-street parking through the section, and with some sort of tactile strip separating the pedestrian sidewalk. So places for people walking and people biking and rolling are all separate, safe. And then the final option, which is was only explored through this one segment, is a hybrid multi-use pathway with so two-way protected bike lanes east and west of this segment that we're looking at. But through this segment, this kind of key segment where we're working to retain all on-street parking, we have a multi-use path which is shared by people walking and biking. Once again, only on the north side of the street, and it is separated from parking lanes. So there's still on-street parking on both sides of the street. And through our stakeholder engagement, we've shared these concepts with the school and sort of asked for their feedback, and that feedback will be used to help us make a decision. Their preference is for a separated facility in front of the school. So having people walking separate from people biking or rolling. Sort of recognizing that this is an area that gets busy with people walking, biking, and driving during school pickup and drop-off hours, and that having separated facilities for them, they think is the safer option. So with that, we have now our design sheets, which highlight the entire corridor from the west end at Wren Street, and highlighting some key features all the way through to the east end of the corridor. And we can walk through these sheets kind of sheet by sheet, but the key concept and layout is that the top option is the option one with one-way protected bicycle lanes on the north and south sides of the street, and only on-street parking on the south side of the street. And then option two is two-way protected bicycle lanes only on the north side of the street, and parking once again only on the south side of the street. There's a number of key features that are called out in both of the maps. So pedestrian safety features, there's curb extensions in front of the retirement residence. And then the bicycle lane is raised for that crossing location as well. So this sort of creates a safe, accessible crossing place for people coming to and from the residence and accessing the park on the south side of the road. Traffic operation. So as we mentioned earlier, two-way traffic is maintained, and existing left turn lanes are also maintained at Hurt Street, which you can see in the middle. The next section, on-street parking. So on-street parking is retained on the south side of the street along this section of the corridor for both options one and option two. Driveway access is maintained, as we mentioned previously. Bus stops are maintained for both options. There's opportunities identified for landscaping or street trees. So there's additional opportunities for option two, where the widened boulevard space between the motor vehicle travel lane and the two-way bicycle lanes provides additional opportunities for landscaping. So something to consider when selecting a preferred concept. And then finally, this is the location at Herd Street, the south side of Herd Street, where there's a channelized right turn, which is creates sort of seen as something that creates some safety concerns for people walking and biking. And so this is a location where our design doesn't show it being closed, but we kind of identified it as a future opportunity to improve Kingsman Park for them. So the same configuration here for the next section from Strachan to Maple Street. where option one-way protected bicycle lanes on the top and two-way protected bicycle lanes on the bottom. Many of the features are the same for each of these options. So once again, crosswalks and a pedestrian refuge island is introduced. Oh, that's actually not on this. Oh, okay, yeah, it's not on this page. I think that might have been a mistake. Yeah, not actually on this page. I think so. That's on the next page. Two-way motor vehicle traffic is maintained. Existing left turn lanes are maintained. Once again, similar to the previous option, there's opportunities for landscaping and street trees within the median. On only option two, the space between the cars and the bikes in option one is a little bit narrow and doesn't provide enough space for sort of more significant landscaping or street trees. And maybe we'll skip to the next slide here. If there's specific questions about locations along the corridor, feel free to put them in the Q&A, and we can answer those questions either at the end or now as we go and kind of zoom in to give you a little bit more detail. So the section that we show the rendering of is the one section along the corridor where it explored a third option. And this third option was really looked at as a way to retain on-street parking, limit property impacts, so as well as recognizing there's some mature trees on the north side of 7th, just to the west of Grand Street. And so when we were looking at the first option, the one-way protected bicycle lanes, this section actually pushes those bike lanes and the sidewalk a little bit to the north through the school property and requires a little bit of property to be acquired from the school, as well as expanding the property lines into the area just south of the leisure center. And this is really done to maximize on-street parking through an area where we've heard there was quite a high demand. Two-way protected bike lanes in option two is a similar story. So once again, maximizing on-street parking through the section, but requiring a little bit more road space to be allocated. And then option three, the multi-use pathway doesn't require as much space because there's not a physical separation between people biking and walking. And that means that it's able to fit within the existing road allowance. We've developed two sub options, which you can see highlighted at the top of the screen for option one and option two, where we've looked at the impacts of maintaining as much parking as possible will have an impact on some mature trees just to the west of Grand Street, as I've mentioned. So if you look at the top of the screen, option 1A with the street trees retained, you're eliminating about 4 additional on-street parking spaces, but those street trees would potentially be maintained. Option 1B, those street trees would be lost, most likely be lost, but would allow additional 4 parking spaces. And then similar for option 2. So with the two-way protected bicycle lanes, the same configuration of losing parking, but retaining trees, or other way around. So 2 kind of sub options to consider as well as we're looking to select our preferred option. We'll keep moving along here. So the next sheet is showing from Wilton Street to Stave Lake Street. So this is the area just to the east of the leisure center. Once again, where we have option 1 with one-way protected bicycle lanes at the north or at the top of the page, and then two-way protected bicycle lanes in the middle of the page. Very similar to the previous section. One area to highlight, so this is where the crosswalk with the refuge island D is in front of the fire hall. So it's one area where some additional, at Horn Street, some additional pedestrian safety is being introduced. And then at James, the new intersection at, I should remember the name, the new intersection just to the west, just to the east of the fire station is where a new signal is being proposed. Yeah, right there. Similar, yeah, so same idea as the previous boards. And then the final section from Stave Lake through to Heritage Park is where the facility actually changes, the traffic volumes drop drastically because the road no longer goes through. And because of that, our recommended design has been changed as well, where we're recommending a shared roadway with people biking and people driving, sharing the space. And this is where at Mary Street, we've also identified an intersection realignment to improve pedestrian safety and driver safety, where sort of the existing skewed intersection creates really challenging sightlines and long crossing distances. So this will provide that connection into Heritage Park and minimize parking impacts through this section of the corridor. Okay, and that is it for our presentation. You can see on this page that there's an ongoing online survey. And so if you go to the engagemission.ca 7th Avenue Greenway site, there is an online survey with much of this material and an opportunity to provide feedback. Also welcome your feedback in the Q&A today. And it looks like maybe some questions that are starting to come in. So maybe I'll pass it back over to Abby Jane and she can kind of help us walk through the questions that have come in so far.
Yeah, thank you, Brian and Brent. We have a couple of questions that have come in. The first one is pertaining to how the Greenway will impact the clearing of snow. So I'm not sure if that's a Brent question, perhaps, or I'm not sure.
Yeah, I can speak to that first, and then maybe Paul can jump in as well if there's anything from the city's perspective. So, depending on the option that's selected, the snow clearing impacts for the Greenway itself. I'm going to take this question as what are the impacts for clearing snow on the Greenway itself? Depend. So the one-way option, which is a little bit narrower, will require different equipment than is probably currently used on the streets in Mission and is typically used specifically for sidewalks or narrow pathways. And so if that's not a machine that is already, I believe that the way Mission currently clears snow on sidewalks and narrow pathways is through contracted work. But as the opportunity to develop more cycling corridors like this comes around, there may be the need to buy equipment for the public works team to have and be able to manage that snow clearing themselves. With the wider two-way protected option, it kind of depends on some of the design treatments. There are communities that use kind of a standard snow blade on the front of a truck to clear this snow. And so there may be more opportunities to minimize the amount of new infrastructure that's required, machinery that's required to clear snow for option 2.
Okay, thanks, Brent. We have another question. It pertains to costs for the Greenway. Someone is asking if you can outline how this will be paid for.
Yeah, I can speak to that.
Okay.
So when council decides to move forward, it's going to have to prepare a budget for it. However, we are looking for active transportation grants for this type of project. This is exactly the type of project that gets the active transportation grants. And they are up to $500,000 per year, up to 2 years, in a 50-50 grant arrangement. So that would basically be available, should be successful, to pay for half of the project, potentially, up to a 2-year maximum period. So we're hopeful that we can be successful with a grant project. Of course, it's never guaranteed, but this is really, the type of community changing, significant, initiating cycling type of project that I know they like to put their money to work. So that's fairly significant. If we were to get some other funding partners. ICBC would probably be in there with some grants on our intersection safety improvements. So they're again another funding partner. Should we get the First Nations involved, they can even increase the grant amounts as well. So we are, I think, going past some First Nation land. So the more stakeholders we get involved in this project, the more grant opportunities we can get. So yeah, we're hopeful that there's additional funds, which really maximizes the tax dollars that go toward this type of community project.
Great, thank you, Paul. I have another question here about timing, asking, is there a ballpark time frame regarding when the construction would commence? Brian, is that a you question?
Well, I can speak to that.
Oh, no, that's a Paul question.
Yeah, because this project is just design. There's, I mean, it's hopeful that we can go ahead this year, but there's some other constraints, or there's some other timing considerations with this project. In order to fully integrate this project with the Ecole Mission Secondary School plans to build a brand new high school, they're not going to have their plans ready until the start of next year in January, to understand fully where the architect is, detailing where their access and perhaps integration may be with this project. So it might take some time to actually work with them next year in order to fully integrate this project with them. We really want to make sure that, I mean, they're a key stakeholder in this. They're going to be one of the prime users, especially in that area for this project. So we want to be considerate with them and fully sync our designs with them. So should we have to wait for them, that may take a little bit more, another 6 months or so next year. Then council, it will go to council and they'll have to consider, their budgetary constraints and whatnot to see whether they want to start that next year. Again, it doesn't have to be started all at once. We can go through a phasing of, perhaps starting with the high school and leisure center, and then, push out each year until we get to Wren and Fraser River Heritage Park. So there's a number of options open to us to consider how we phase in the construction process.
Great, thank you, Paul. One more question we have here. It's about whether there's any talk of extending the Greenway further west into the Silverdale area.
Well, that's an interesting prospect. Of course, we have some a large creek valley in there. So that would, although not being considered, we know that there's some plans for some trails, some hiking trails and whatnot through that whole river valley area. Whether or not it would be something that cycling could integrate with would be a great exploration for another project when we get to that area. So though not part of this project, hopefully something that we can talk to as this gets built and expansion. Obviously, Silverdale is going to expand a lot, and any connections we can make to that are going to be positive for us. Thanks.
Great. I don't have any other questions at the moment. I'm just gonna open it up if anyone feels that there are other questions that they'd like to pose of the team. Now is your
Looks like
time.
there's another question in chat.
In chat? Let's have a look here. Yes, there is. Will there be any property that will be taken from the houses along the corridor? or will the greenway be extending from the current sidewalk? So if someone could perhaps speak to the property right-of-way sort of issue.
Yeah, for sure. I can speak to that. So the design that we're proposing, the only section where we're proposing constructing part of the greenway in property that's not existing road right of way is in front of the school and in front of the leisure center. The rest of the corridor, the design actually is not even impacting the sidewalk, and it's sitting within the existing roadway. So where the sort of face of the curb to the face of the curb on the other side of the road is where we fixed our design and kind of minimizing impacts to individual properties along the corridor. So there's nowhere where we're looking at any other property acquisition. It's sort of working with sort of pseudo internal city stakeholders with the school district and then with the other sort of internal city committees to take land in front of the leisure center as well. Thanks for the question.
Thanks, Brent. Those were great questions. If there's anyone else that has any questions, I'm looking at both the questions and answer tool as well as chat. So whatever you're more comfortable with, please feel free. Now's your chance if you have points you need clarified or anything else. I'm just going to give everyone a minute to, oh, it looks like I have another question here. So this question is again about costs, and it's a question about if we could provide a breakdown in terms of the least expensive to the most expensive option.
I can speak to that as well. So sort of the first caveat will be that we haven't developed cost estimates at this point. Sort of our approach was to select a preferred concept and work through this round of public engagement, highlighting a number of different design options and then really figuring out which design treatments we want to use for this preferred option is the next step. But with that being said, I think that option one, which requires work on both sides of the street, is most likely going to cost more. Until we actually get into the details of what those cost differences are going to be, it's hard to know exactly. But the option one, which requires work along the entire corridor on both sides of the street, would most likely cost more than option two. And then the difference between option two and option three, which is really a kind of a sub option of option two in front of the school, would likely be pretty marginal. So I think that the bigger cost difference would likely be between option one and option two. Likely option three of the multi-use path would be a little bit cheaper than the separated facilities in front of the school of option two. But until we have a preferred concept and figure out sort of what our options are and sort of select the design treatments, specific design treatments, we won't know what those costs are. Thanks for the question again.
Yeah, and just to kind of put that in perspective, most of the greenway is all the same. Really, only those three options are just, within a few blocks is all we're talking about. So even those differences may not turn out to be relatively, significant in the overall cost of the project.
Thanks, Paul. So those were lots of really great, clear questions. If anyone else has any questions that our team here could answer, just going to give everyone a moment. We have a little more time. Okay. Okay.
I'll just maybe chime in and say, really appreciate the questions, and sort of I've attended a number of these sessions, and it's great to see a bunch of questions up front, not needing to fill as much airtime as maybe sometimes we do. So just want to say thank you for participants, and look forward to any other questions if there are some more, but yeah, thank you for the ones that have been provided so far.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Really
these are
good
some
questions, really clear.
really great questions. These are the types of things that we want to answer. Most people have on their mind. They want to know costs. Does it affect their property? How's it going to be maintained? And just a comment on maintaining them. We're currently working through our maintenance policies right now, because multi-use pathways and these types of facilities are new to Mission. 14th Avenue is going to be our first multi-use pathway along it. And we want to make sure that our maintenance of them reflects the type of use that we're expecting for it. We want them to be safe. We want them to be clear of branches and litter and whatnot. And we want to be able to clear it in the wintertime. So all of these are on the minds of us when we're building these new facilities. And like Brent said, we currently go out to contract for clearing our most significant sidewalks that we have a plan for down Cedar, et cetera. That will likely be expanded initially, but Brent's right. If we need to get a special vehicle just for the width of these pathways, 3 meters or 4 meters, we'll have to do that. We simply have to put a budget toward maintaining them to the best of our ability. We want them to be used. We want them to really start the cycling mindset in Mission. Not a lot of us cycle here, and we need a place to go. We need a place to get out of the car on our bikes and explore, because we have some great facilities, great parks, and great, once you start exploring, you start to see the connections, like off center. When I was 7th, when I was looking at this project, there's these little pathways that connect down to another, down by the fire hall to 5th Street by the elementary center. So you can go past these tennis courts, and then you end up at the, the elementary school. And from there, a walkway down to Welton, and bang, you're on the, you're at First Avenue. So it's very interesting once you start exploring that you can find these north and south connections from this spine that we're trying to create. So the whole idea is to spur the those who are living like yourselves, either on 7th or close to it, the ability and opportunity to explore your community on foot or skateboard or roll or bike, whatever it is that you have, and use transit from there to get around the entire community. We want to make this whole kind of journey of anybody's by walking is by how everything starts to be really seamless and as open and accessible and safe and lit as possible. So that's the whole idea.
Thanks, Paul.
More questions, Abby Jean?
Just looking in the chat, I don't see any questions there. I don't. Yes, I do. Well, I have a comment, and it's just someone sharing that they've ordered some e-bikes and they're happy to hear about the Greenway. So just
wonderful.
Positive news to share,
great.
and they're looking forward to other cycling options once they get their bikes.
Perfect. Well, we'll have 14th Avenue soon. Hopefully this will, connect up, be constructed at some point in the future, and we can start making those east-west connections for active transportation. Our transit system is set to improve by at least 2,500 hours plus. So we have a lot of these active transportation systems coming together over the next, few years. And I'm really excited at how this can possibly change the nature of Mission, get us out of our vehicles and start exploring our wonderful neighborhood. I'm going to say thank you to all of our participants for coming out, taking the time to listen to the presentation. And, like I just echo Brent, these are excellent questions, very well thought out. So thank you for those. And hopefully you'll be one of those champions on Facebook. And the engagement, we look forward to you actively, speaking about this wonderful project. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and you've got a thank you here, right
And
back at you from the participants here. So
our next steps after this are going to be, we're going to take all of this second round engagement information together. Urban Systems is, and maybe Brian, you want to talk about kind of how you take this information to develop one plan out of it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Paul. Yeah. So again, echoing both your comments, thanking you for all your input. These are great questions. And at the open house we had in person on the weekend as well, we had some really great discussions with everybody who was able to attend those. So that's really helpful for us, along with the survey results. So hopefully you've had a chance to fill out the survey. If not, again, it's open until July the 25th. And that's really important input for us to really understand what's most important for all of these 6 themes that we talked about, and hearing preferences in terms of the 3 specific design options. Our task, once that closes, is to then kind of go through all that input and go through some technical analysis to select a preferred option. So we'll be looking at certainly what the results are from the public input and what the preferences are for those options. And we're also doing what we call a multiple account evaluation of each of the options, which is essentially looking at all of the pros and cons of the options from a wide range of perspectives, really looking essentially at the themes we talked about tonight. So from pedestrian safety and traffic operations and cycling and transit and otherwise, how do these options compare against each other, and using that to really kind of have a technical basis along with the public input to select a preferred option. And we'll be doing that over the course of the summer to really identify what that preferred option would be. And then we would essentially kind of confirm the details of that preferred option. And there's still certainly some details to be ironed out with a preferred option. And those are things we get into as we get into what we call the detailed design phase. And that's when we get into kind of the detailed engineering drawings for that preferred concept. Through all of that, at that point, we would be developing cost estimates as well, going back to some of the earlier questions. And I think that's where it starts to get into the questions about once we kind of know that cost for a preferred concept and we have a pretty well-defined concept, taking that to council to get their input and starting to think about those funding strategies and looking at how we can, maximize or leverage those external grant opportunities that Paul was talking about. There's also some of the features in the designs are already included in the city's capital budget. Things like the traffic signal at Murray Street it's already been identified through the city's development cost charge program as a growth-related cost. So there's certain elements there that maybe funding has already been allocated for certain features. So it's a bit complicated how we put all those pieces together. But yeah, that would be ultimately kind of what we're looking to do and kind of figuring out what the financial strategy would be to pay for this. And then that would kind of drive those discussions about the construction timing as well. So still a lot of steps to go here, but this is really great to help us kind of take kind of a broad range of options. And now we'll start to kind of narrow down to that preferred option and really start to get into those details so we get a better sense of what it would actually look like and cost and how to kind of take those next steps towards design.
Thanks, Brian. I'm just going to thank everyone very much, and I'm going to share my screen just quickly here. And for those of you who are more visually inclined, I don't know if you can see my screen now, but this just has the website. If you do have more questions that come to mind, that's a good place to submit those. As everyone mentioned, there's an online survey and that's open until July the 25th.